Chapter 9. It wasn't easy to think of a plan when I didn't even know what the problem was. Uncle was doing something that Abjui didn't like. So should he plan to try to stop what Uncle was doing, or just help him do whatever it was and get Abjui to agree that it was a good thing? At least I knew what the first step was. I needed to find out exactly what Uncle was doing. So I started stopping by the shop on my way home from school. I didn't think Uncle would suspect anything. I'd always gone to his shop at least once every few weeks. If he wasn't too busy, we had fun together. He'd print fake newspapers with my name in them, like the time I'd been named class leader. Kim Sun-hee appointed to important post. That's what the headline had said. Of course, I couldn't keep the papers because he always used my Korean name. So I'd look at them for a while and then burn them. It was odd, but whenever I had one of those pretend newspapers in the house, my hearing seemed to get better. I was always hearing footsteps in the lane, footsteps that sounded like Japanese guards. The first time I went to Uncle's shop on my mission, it was a bright autumn day. My friend, Jungshin, came with me. Jungshin's family had moved to town some months earlier. We became friends almost right away. I liked her on sight because she had the same kind of smile behind her eyes that Uncle did. We had a lot in common. We were both the youngest in our families. She had an older sister, Hiwan. Both of us liked to read and enjoyed learning kanji. We were exactly the same height, and her Japanese name was Keoko, which was very similar to Keoko. Jungshin was teaching me to play cat's cradle. Every day she brought a long piece of string to school. She tied the ends of the string together, pulled her hands into the loop. Then she cleverly wrapped and pulled the string with her fingers until it looked like a gate with crossed bars. She showed me how to transfer the string from her hands to mine in another pattern. We passed the string back and forth. Jungshin seemed to know dozens of ways to make new patterns with it. I made up little stories to go with the passing of the string and would say them aloud. A girl opens the gate, the crossed bars, and she comes into a road, the string in 4 neat straight lines. The road goes over a bridge, crossbars like the gate, only upside down, on which the spider has woven his web. That was my favorite pattern. It was intricate but perfectly symmetrical, and really did look like a spider's web. We always played cat's cradle for a few minutes after school. Sometimes Jungshin would come home with me. We'd do our homework together, then play more cat's cradle. Jungshin was better at it than I was. She played quite often with her sister. And when we played fast, it was almost always my fault when the string ended up in a tangle. We passed the string so quickly that we had to concentrate hard on making the right moves, and it was always a relief to collapse in laughter when one of us made a mistake. That was how Jungshin's sister, Hiwan, usually found us, playing cat's cradle or else silly with laughter. On the days Jungshin was at my house, Hiwan often came by in late afternoon to walk her home. On this particular day, I'd had enough of cat's cradle and thought of something else to do. Let's go into town, I suggested. We can find the popcorn man. A few days earlier, Jungshin had brought me a special treat, a few pieces of dook. The sweet rice cake was a favorite snack. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd eaten some. It took a great deal of the finest white rice to make dook. I had nibbled the slices of dook slowly, to make it last as long as possible, and Jungshin had seemed very pleased at my appreciation. Now it was my turn to treat her. I went to the kitchen shelves. I asked Amoni for some popping corn. There wasn't much left in the little bag, so I took nearly all of it and put it in a hollow gourd. Then I fetched 2 pennies from my savings box and put them in my coin purse. I also brought along an empty grain sack. On fine days, the popcorn man roamed the streets of our town, wheeling a little cart. He sold corn for 2 cents. He would pop the corn you brought him. We found him a few blocks away and gave him the gourd of corn. The popping was always fun to watch. He poured the dried kernels into one end of the device that looked rather like a pot-bellied cannon, which contained some kind of heating element. After a few minutes, popped corn came shooting out of the cannon's barrel and was caught in a wire mesh basket. When the popping sound stopped, the popcorn man took the basket off while I held my sack underneath so the fluffy popcorn could fall into it. Jungshin and I walked along the street munching our snack. We turned a corner and I said, "My uncle's shop's on the street. Why don't we go there?" It was really what I had in mind all along. If I showed Junction around the shop, I might learn something about what Uncle was doing. Junction agreed eagerly. She'd often heard me speak of Uncle, but had never met him. When we reached the shop, Uncle greeted me with his usual cheerful smile. In return, I said, "Uncle, I would like you to meet a friend of mine. This is Pat Junction." Junction bowed politely to Uncle and smiled at her. I was proud to be introducing my friend. She looked so pretty with her new white collar and her uniform. "I'm pleased to meet you," Uncle said. "Tell me about your family." My father is Pak Sunjun," Young Shu replied. "My family moved here a few months ago. My father has a new job at the bank." Uncle nodded, but the look in his eyes changed. The little lines around his eyes that made his smile so pleasant seemed to disappear. His eyes suddenly looked almost blank, expressionless, even though his mouth was still smiling. Or was I only imagining things? Then Uncle turned to me. "I'm sorry, son, but I'm just busy now. You and your friend must stop by another time. Perhaps then I will be able to print something special for her." Junction was delighted by his offer, and I thanked him politely, but I was puzzled. It was quiet in the shop. There were no customers, and Uncle was not running between the printing press and the counter in the paper storeroom. But, of course, I honored his request, and we turned to leave. Uncle walked us to the door, and this too puzzled me. He waved to us as we walked away. I took one last glance over my shoulder and saw Uncle scanning the street carefully. I didn't know what to think. When I got home, I took my shoes off as usual, put on straw slippers, and went to find Taiyul in the workshop area behind his house. "I went to see Uncle just now," I said. Then I hesitated. I intended to tell him about Uncle's behavior with Junction and how he looked up and down the street after we left. But now it seemed silly. I didn't want Taiyul to think that I was making a big deal out of nothing. I bit my lip and then said I didn't discover anything. He sighed. "I haven't been able to find anything either. We'll just have to keep trying. Now, don't forget, whatever you find out, don't do anything about it. Come and tell me first. We're working on all this together, remember?" I nodded automatically but felt annoyed. He still thought I was a baby. How I wished I could simply talk to Uncle about it, but I knew this would be unfair. Asking him to talk to us about things if Julie disapproved would be disrespectful. The weeks passed without either of us learning anything more about Uncle's activities. The mystery even slipped my mind sometimes because I had other things to think about. I would soon graduate from elementary school in the new year. I'd start junior high school. I'd passed all my examinations with good marks, but I didn't stop studying. I wanted to be ready for the more difficult junior high courses. One wintry afternoon, I was in the sitting room, bent over my books, when suddenly I heard shouting in the lane. It was Taiyul's voice, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I rushed to the door. "The Japanese have attacked America," he shouted breathlessly as he rushed out inside. He tore off his cap and came in, his cheeks red with cold and excitement. Abjudi and Amoni had too come to the courtyard. Abjudi from his room and Amoni from the kitchen. "Taiyul, calm yourself," Abjudi said. "What are you saying?" "It was on the radio. Everyone's talking about it." Abjudi frowned. "Possibly a rumor. It seems highly unlikely." Taiyul crossed the courtyard to the sitting room, turned on the radio. The transmission was a static-riddled and somewhat garbled, but we could still make out some words. "Spectacular victory. Pearl Harbor. Hawaii. Important military base. Enemy completely taken by surprise. Heavy damaged." While Abjui and Taiyul crouched by the radio, I stood to one side and whispered translation to Maloney. After several minutes, Abjui turned the radio, his face grave. "It's a very serious action," he said to Taiyul. "It means Japan is at war with the United States. I feel hard times ahead." Just then, Uncle rushed in, as excited as Taiyul had been. He was waving a flyer in one hand. "You've all heard, have you? It's incredible news. Taiyul, I need your help at the shop. The military command has ordered hundreds of these flyers to be printed and distributed all over town." Abjuli held up his hand. "Surely, Taiyul, you have studying to do." Taiyul looked from Uncle to Abjuli and back again. I could tell he wanted to go with Uncle to be part of the excitement. Uncle bowed his head. "Hu Jungin, I will secure permission for Taiyul to miss school tomorrow and to make up his lessons at a later date. This is very important work. Everyone must know the details of this event. His help is sorely needed." Abjui pursed his lips for a moment and then finally looked at Tayul. "See that you work twice as hard in your studies tonight," he said. Tayul bowed hastily. "Yes, Abjui. Thank you, Abjui." He jammed his cap back on and hurried out the door with Uncle. A quick flame of anger flared in me. I'd have liked to have gone with Uncle as well. I could have helped stack the flyers and bind them with twine while you delivered them. Why should he have all the fun? I wandered out into the lane. My steps took me in the direction of Tomo's house. These days, Tomo and I'd played together and less often than we used to. It just was we'd outgrown our childhood games. We'd spent more time with Junction. But Tomo and I still sometimes thought of each other when we had time to play.